Hello and welcome back for another video of China in the Global South. My name is Christian Géraud. I'm the Africa editor of the China Global South Project, a media that covers China engagement and involvement in the Global South. It's been a while since I've posted. The last video I've posted in this segment was 3 months ago, where I was talking about the BRICS expansion, and I was giving you my quick takeaway about what's going to happen, what might be the consequences of BRICS expansion. So today I'm back again for a new series of video, and that we now move from China in the Global South, that we are now calling the China-Africa debate. Previously, for those who've been following me, you've noticed that I was talking about China in the Global South in general. I was talking about China involvement in Africa and talking about China in Middle East and Latin America. But now we're going to be more focusing on the discussion about happening what China is doing in Africa. That's why we now call this segment the China-Africa debate with Christian Géraud Neema. In the meantime, since 3 months ago, the CGSP, the China Global South, has produced a wide range of products. Now we do have our weekly CGSP roundtable, where different members of the CGSP team gather together and talk about different issues related to China in the Global South. Usually we meet with Kobus Van Staden, Eric Hollander, Antonia Timmerman, Jenga Akina, different members of the China Global South, where we gather together and we talk about different issues related to China in the Global South. And we also launched a video segment in our English section only so far. We're going to expand it in our French and Arabic section, but so far it's still on the English section, where we're going to have a series of videos that are going only to be for our subscriber on the website. We're going to be making quick takeaway comments and deep diving analysis on different issues that we covered on China in the Global South. But that section, those videos are only going to be available for our subscribers, those who receive our newsletters and those members who are following us and are subscribing to our English channel. But still, we're gonna still providing free videos here on our YouTube channels. One of them being the China-Africa debate I'm doing right now, and also the CGSP roundtable with my other colleagues. But if you want to have a much more deeper analysis and deep knowledge about different things that we do on the China Global South, I'd suggest you really to subscribe to our content, and we're going to have much more content in video in the English segment. And later on, if everything goes well, we're going to expand those videos in French as well. For those who haven't noticed yet, I'm a French speaker, so I'm gonna be also making those videos about China in Africa, but in French, because we did notice that there's a lot that's lacking in that space, and I do believe there is a need for us to bring that debate in French as well. And that was even the reason why we did start the French section of the China in Africa project that later on became China in the Global South. That's why we started the French section, where I'm heading the Francophone team. So it's to allow the China-Africa discussion to happen in French. So beginning next year, I'm not going to give you a date because he's still working on that, but it's definitely going to be in the first trimester of 2024. We are going to have our China-Africa debate in French. So, our French speaker, je vous demande de prendre votre mal en patience. Nous allons à nouveau avoir ces débats en français où nous allons échanger sur les différentes questions liées à la présence chinoise en Afrique, pas simplement en Afrique francophone, mais en Afrique. Mais nous allons avoir ces discussions en français. Sorry for my English followers, for those who've been following us in English. I just told the Francophone team that we are going to have now those videos made in French as well, so we can have much more discussion and much more debate on those different issues. So that being said, let me now dive into the topic of the discussion today of this video. So today, the topic of this video is leading us to Morocco, how Morocco in Africa is becoming an unexpected winner of Chinese strategy to try to circumvent the United States Inflation Reduction Act in the US, how Morocco has slowly taken advantage of that Chinese strategy and how it's playing out. So the story stems from a coverage that I've done I think 3 weeks ago, about a Canadian company, SRG Mining, and one Chinese company called Carbon One New Energy Group. The announcement of the agreement was done on November 29, 2023. So the agreement they signed provides for the development of a graphite-based anode plant for EV batteries in Morocco. It also confirms that the Chinese company China Carbon One is going to invest $2.7 million in SRG, which still listed in Toronto Stock Exchange, but is accepted to relocate outside of Canada. And the choice was made because SRG Mining did not want to submit the agreement they signed with the Chinese company to the approval of the Canadian government, because Canada has now a regulation, the Investment Canada Act, that's kind of give the government the power to give an approval on investment on certain sector of the economy, especially when it related to now critical minerals, lithium, EV batteries, and all those green energy sectors. Now, Canadian government is becoming much more meticulous and paying much more attention to that. So they kind of be careful on that. So the agreement that Canadian company signed with the Chinese company, the Canadian company agreed that for us to move forward in this deal, we agreed to relocate outside Canada. So we won't subject ourselves to the Canadian approval before moving forward. Where they're going to relocate, I don't know. That's going to be another debate. But the question for me, not the really question, but the surprise for me was to notice how much Morocco has been attracting a lot of China plus X company, most of them China plus Western or Western allied companies joint venture in Morocco, especially in the EV industry, in lithium processing, and in EV batteries making, in auto EV making, manufacturing. Morocco has been attracting a lot of those kind of joint venture involving Chinese company and Western company in those deals. When you look closely in the situation, you kind of now understand what is in play here and how Morocco, as I said earlier, has become an expected winner of Chinese strategy to try to bypass the US Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in August 2022 to kind of block Chinese company to enter the US market. But it was much more to allow the US to develop its own supply chain, its own green transition metal supply chain that are, that are stripped from Chinese influence, that are less reliant of Chinese influence. Because when you look at the spectrum of the supply chain of green metals, you do realize that the overwhelming China domination on that supply chain, from mining in different places to processing to manufacturing different elements of EV batteries and any green energy product. China is just overwhelming, dominating that supply chain. Since then, the US has been very much worried how much they've been relying on China and depending on that. And since then, the US has put a series of mechanisms to try really to develop its own supply chain, and different initiatives have been put in place. I'm not going to talk about those initiatives here. The MSP, I think I've talked about that before, the Minor Security Partnership, the deal with the DRC, Zambia, and the US, and different initiatives have been put in place in that regard. The US are not alone. You also have the European Union that has also put a series of mechanisms and regulation that's kind of trying to develop their own supply chain and trying to get the private sector to work with them in developing their own supply chain free from any Chinese influence. But getting back to the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act is one element that it's relying on for the development of a free and less dependent supply chain. So the success of the IRA depends, among other things, on what the US is calling friendshoring. Friendshoring is where the US is relying on minerals mined in friendly countries, allied countries, or countries that have free trade agreement with the US. Why the US is counting on those countries? Because those countries, to mine minerals there or to build supply chain there, can be cost effective for many private companies. That's why, to create that incentive, the US is also is encouraging private companies to invest in those countries, because building those supply chain home, what they call onshoring, and the US, within the US, can sometimes cannot be cost effective. So they kind of also rely on friendly countries where the cost can be low. That's where they can invest. So this is what they call friend shoring. They also rely on the willingness of the private sector to follow them. Basically, for the private sector to kind of align themselves with the agenda of the government. But so far, what we've noticed that many Western companies are still willing to do business with Chinese companies, despite the fact that government have been expressing concern over and over about how the countries are vulnerable to China's supply chain and how it can be really difficult for them to keep on doing that. But you look at the private sector, you just notice that many of them are still kind of willing and signing contract to do business with Chinese company. So one of the provisions of the IRA, as I was saying, is, to discourage private companies to use cars that contain minerals that have been built in China or processed in China, something like that. You can read the IRA. You're gonna get much more details. I'm just kind of brushing through it, so I'm not going to delve into the details. So the idea is that. So what China has decided to do, China decided now, just to find a way to bypass those requirements, China has decided to start investing in US-friendly countries. One of those countries being South Korea in Asia and Morocco in Africa. So in South Korea, China has been investing billions of dollars in the lithium processing in South Korea, to the point where many Korean companies were against the idea of banning Chinese investment in the lithium in the country, because now you have so many South Korean company doing business with Chinese company, opening joint venture, creating joint venture to process lithium, to build EV batteries, and all wide range of product that you can find in the EV battery supply chain. So beside Korea in Asia, you also have Morocco in Africa, where China has found a way to do business there, to create companies there, to create joint venture there. So what China has done is quite smart. We decided to create joint venture with Korean companies, and that Korean company is going to open, that joint venture is going to open a manufacturing company in Morocco. And in this case of the story I was talking about, they signed an agreement with a Canadian company that willingly decide to relocate its old headquarters outside Canada so it can move forward in the deal with the Chinese company. That just tells you how much that company really wanted to do the business with Chinese company. So they created a joint venture and they decide to open a company in Morocco where they're going to build EV anode made of graphite. So why they choose Morocco? Because first, Morocco is geographically close to Europe, which means that Morocco is like, one easy few hours away from the European market, first of all. Second of all, Morocco has a free trade agreement with both the US and many European Union countries. So basically, by doing that, China, using a Korean company, creating a joint venture, building a manufacturing company in Morocco, allows those Chinese companies to still have access to, first, European markets, and second, to the American market as well. They kind of play the IRA to their advantage. The interesting part of it's like, you see how much Western private companies are still willing to do business with Chinese company no matter what. It's where the West strategy is kind of weak in that regard, because they don't have the ability to compel or to convince or to force their private companies to not do business with Chinese companies. And Chinese companies, being private or public, are taking advantage of that, knowing the weaknesses the Western government do have and the inability to compel the companies not to do business with them. They just sign agreement with any other companies, like being Korean companies and the American companies. In this case here, it's Canadian companies. And when I talk about Korean company, let me just give you another example involving a Korean company. Last October, Korea, LGHM, and China, Yoshan, which is a subsidiary of Zhejiang Huayo Cobalt, announced a partnership to build a lithium phosphate iron cathode plant scheduled to come online in 2026 and to produce up to 50,000 tons of LFP cathode. And that plant is going to be based in Morocco. So that just tells you the approach that the Chinese are using to still remain relevant in the supply chain of green metals and in the supply chain of EV batteries. And in that strategy, countries like Morocco are becoming the unexpected winner of Chinese strategy to trying to bypass US and European and Western restriction to the market in the EV battery industry. So Morocco is likely to keep on being that winner in this China strategy, trying to bypass restriction put on place in the US, in Europe, and any other Western countries. But when I think of it, I just realize, as I was saying earlier, one of the biggest weaknesses of the West in that fight against China is the fact that they really don't have the ability to compel or to force their private sector to do anything. Those companies are profit-driven entities. They follow the markets, they follow the rules of the market. So they don't always align themselves with geopolitical consideration coming from their government or their any concern. And I think that's one of the weaknesses that the West is still going to have in that fight with China in the supply chain of EV batteries and green metals. So for now, we are going to keep on seeing how Morocco is going to keep on winning and taking advantage of that China strategy, and just sit back and wait for more investment to come. But beyond Morocco, I see countries like Algeria, Egypt also taking advantage of that. I don't know if Algeria or Egypt, they do have free trade agreement with the US or in European countries, but you can keep on watching. Any country that's have a free trade agreement with the US and Europe can become the next destination of many Chinese investment in the EV supply chain. That was the story I wanted to talk to you about today. I think I've been a bit rusty. It's been a while since I've done those videos, but yeah, bear with me, and sorry for if you find here and there some mistakes. And but yeah, feel free to send your comment and feedback about this video. And the story I'm talking about was originally written in French only, and you can find the French story in the projetfriction.com in the French section of the China Global South. And you can use Google Translate or DeepL to kind of translate the story and to understand what is it about. I think in the coming weeks, maybe we're going to be translating that in English, and you're going to also see the story in English as well. So that's all for me. I'm going to see you next week for another video of China-Africa debates, where we're going to talk about another issue that's, that's happening in the China-Africa space. I have few videos, I promise. I've mentioned them in the roundtable that I'm going to produce. One of them is related on how Google Bard created a fake news related to Chinese companies in the RC. I'm going to be talking about that. So if you like this content and really want to be updated about everything that we do publish in the China Global South, click the subscribe button and click that ring bell so you are notified every time we post a new video. So just keep in mind, we're going to be having every Friday the roundtable that's going to come up online. We are going to have the China-Africa debate that I've resumed today. As I said earlier, we also have the video section that's going to be available only on the English section and only for our subscribers. So if you want much more of what we are doing, I'm going to suggest you to subscribe to our English website. So you're going to have much more video, more than what we publish here on YouTube. And beginning next year, 2024, and I say I don't give you dates, but I do believe that in the first trimester of 2024, we are going to have the China-Africa debate in French for the French speaker in Africa and elsewhere in the world. So that was all for me, and I'm going to see you next week for another video of China-Africa debate. Bye-bye.